Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my May marked as to read video. So my marked as to read video, you'll know if you've been watching my channel, is a series of videos where I talk about all of the books that I marked as to read on Goodreads during the last month. So this is all of the books that I marked as to read during the month of May. I have 14 books to talk about, so let's jump in and talk about all of the books that got me excited over the past month. The first book I want to talk about is Endless Night by Richard Lehman. This is a book that I actually saw on Peter Likes Books channel. He was talking about this book. I believe Richard Lehman, I've never read anything by him, but I believe he's kind of like a Stephen King-esque author. Like he's quite prolific in like the horror kind of genre. And this is a book that just kind of sounds like your kind of average teen slasher movie, but in book form. So I believe it follows a main character who is at a sleepover at her friend's house when her friend and her friend's entire family are basically murdered by this group of people who like break in. And she escapes and survives, but then one of the like killers is tasked with like tracking her down as being like the sole witness. So I believe Peter described it as terrifying, and I love like kind of teen slasher movies, so this sounds right up my alley and like definitely something I would enjoy reading. Next we have The Takedown by Corey Wang. So this is a book that has been getting a bit of buzz on BookTube. This is I believe it's a YA story about a girl who is it's set in like the not too distant future where technology is like a much bigger thing, I believe, and well, even bigger than it is now. And I believe she's like a really like popular, like, you know, in the popular clique kind of student, and a video is leaked of her having sex with a teacher, but it's not actually her. Like the video has been doctored, and I believe it's all about her trying to kind of like track down who has like framed her and why they're framing her and all of that stuff. It just sounds really, really interesting. I really like the idea of kind of technology and how it plays in our lives and things like that. It sounds really interesting, so definitely something that I wouldn't mind looking into in the future. Next we have Menagerie by Rachel Vincent. This is a book that I actually saw over on Sarah Jane from the Book Life channel. I believe it's the first book in a series, and it just sounded really, really interesting. I believe it's about a woman who goes to see this kind of like circus where they have these like creatures and stuff like on display, and it is basically, I don't know how, but through some turn of events it is discovered that she has this quality like of this creature like within her or whatever, and she's basically immediately captured and stripped of like her name and everything that like makes her human, and like captured and basically put on display like in this circus. That just sounds like really, really intriguing and interesting to me, and Sarah Jane had really, really good things to say about it. I know that she loved Rachel Vincent just generally as an author, and I don't think I've ever read anything by Rachel Vincent. Is Rachel Vincent the author of the Shifter series? I believe she might be, and I know I own like some of those books. I think I own like the first 4 in that series, which I haven't read, but this one sounds extremely intriguing. The next book I marked as to read is Kill the Boy Band by Goldie Moldavsky. This is a book that just sounds like a lot of fun. I believe it's about a group of girls who are really obsessed with this kind of like One Direction-esque band, and they basically they stay in the same hotel where this band is staying while they're on tour, I presume, and they end up kidnapping one of the members of this band. And I believe it's just supposed to be like a really like funny, lighthearted book about kidnapping a member of a band. It just sounds like a lot of fun and like something that would be like a really like fun read to like maybe, you know, read to like, if you're reading a lot of heavy books, this could be something fun to pick up, and like it just sounds really interesting, and I've heard really good things about it, so I definitely want to read this at some point. Next we have The Marriage Lie by Kimberly Bell. This one I saw over on Gabby Reed's channel. This is a psychological thriller, which, as we all know, I friggin' love psychological thrillers, and this one is about a woman who believes that she has kind of like the perfect marriage, and then one day her husband is going on a flight like away for work to, I believe, Orlando. And then there is a plane crash from another plane that is headed to Seattle, and everyone on board or whatever is killed, and it's discovered that her husband was on that plane, and then it starts to kind of become a thing that maybe she didn't know everything about her husband. Like, why was he going to Seattle and not to Orlando? What's going on? There's maybe some secrets in their marriage that she didn't know about, things like that. It sounds like, to be fair, like a pretty like typical plot for like a psychological thriller like about marriage, but I enjoy that type of thing, so I definitely want to read this one at some point. Next, I want to talk about Longbourn by Jo Baker. Now, this one I've actually heard a little bit about recently on quite a few channels, but the main person I heard talking about it was Kirsty over at Melbourne on My Mind, and she was talking about this book. It is basically a retelling of Pride and Prejudice from the perspective of like the staff, like the servants in the Bennet household, and that just sounds to me very, very exciting and like something that would be totally up my alley. Pride and Prejudice, if you didn't know, is my favorite Jane Austen book, so I definitely want to get my hands on this one. Next, we have The Elementals by Michael McDowell. Now, I don't really know too much about this except that it's got something to do with like 3 houses on an island and some kind of haunting aspect, but this is Katie over at Chapter Stacks, one of her like favorite like horror or scary books, I believe she said, and I was like, okay, well, if Katie from Chapter Stacks, who is like a horror aficionado, friggin' loves this book, then I definitely need to check it out. Next, we have Unearthly Things by Michelle Gagnon. Now, this is one that I saw Emma Books talking about in a book haul, and now this, all I know about it is that it's a retelling of Jane Eyre set in San Francisco. Now, I haven't actually read Jane Eyre, but I do own a copy and I do want to read it soon, but it's one of those books that I really feel like inside I'm going to love, and every time something is described as being a retelling of it, I immediately want to read it, even though I haven't actually read Jane Eyre. So that was basically the case with this one. It's like a modern day, like I said, set in San Francisco. That was enough for me. Next, we actually have a non-fiction book that I saw on one of the Goodreads blog posts about books hitting shelves in the next 7 days, which, as you know, I get a lot of my recommendations from those posts. I just really love that blog post. Now, I am going to just be looking at the screen to talk to you guys about this one because the title and the author name are all really long, and there's also a couple of quotes in the synopsis that I want to give you guys. So sorry if I'm looking to the side over here. This book is called The Fact of a Body, A Murder and a Memoir by Alexandria Marzano-Lesnevich. And this is as I said, a non-fiction book, and I believe it follows a woman who, well, like a young woman who has recently got her first job out of law school, and she has always been very anti-death penalty, and then this kind of case comes up, I think, in the news about someone who is about to be I don't know if he's about to be put to death. I think he is. He's on death row, and she's just basically starts looking into his case because she had a very strong reaction when she saw it, wanting him to be put to death. And so she starts looking into his case and just kind of finding out about, I don't believe this is about like finding whether he's innocent. I believe it is about just him and what has made him get to this point that he's at of being a murderer, and like his life and what happened to him in his past and all of those types of things. And it's got some really interesting little quotes in the synopsis, but I'll just read to you quickly. It says things like, how we grapple with our own personal histories. Along the way, it tackles questions about the nature of forgiveness and if a single narrative can ever really contain something as definitive as the truth. So it just sounds very, very intriguing. I have actually been getting into a bit more this year, like non-fiction about crime. I read a book earlier in the year, the title is escaping me at the moment, but about a woman who had been raped that I talked about on this channel, and about her quest for justice 20 years later when she finally got a DNA hit and they found the man who had raped her. And that just opened my eyes to a lot of issues in the legal system and stuff that I wasn't really aware of, or in the US legal system anyway. And I don't know, it was just really interesting, and this book just definitely piqued my interest and sounds like something that I would find really, really fascinating. Next, we have The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This is one that basically I just came across on Goodreads and realized that I'd never marked it as to read, even though it's a book that I've always had on my radar as being something that I wanted to read eventually. All I know about this is that people have very mixed opinions about it, and that it is described basically as being Harry Potter for adults. Or Harry Potter in college, maybe, even? I'm not really sure. Anything compared to Harry Potter, even though most of the time that means it's a total letdown, means I want to read it. Next, we have another book that I've been wanting to read for ages, and that is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. Now, this is actually another non-fiction book, and I believe this one is around, is it the 1890s World Fair, and about a serial killer that was kind of using the fair to lure in his victims, I believe. Again, totally fascinating subject matter and something that I think I'd find really interesting. Next, we have Days of Grace by Catherine Hall. Now, Catherine Hall is actually an author that I've heard Simon over at Savage Reads talking about on his channel, and there's another book of hers that he absolutely loved, but I decided I wanted to check out her first book first. I also believe that her writing has been compared to Sarah Waters. Now, I haven't read anything by Sarah Waters, but again, she's another author that really, really interests me. I do own her book Fingersmith that I really want to get to at some point. I am just going to read you the synopsis of Goodreads because it is only one sentence, and that says, a tautly plotted and suspenseful debut about an intense wartime friendship, a suppressed passion, a jealous crime, and a corrosive secret kept for decades. That sounds very, very interesting. Like I said, Simon has amazing things to say about this author, and I believe he gave this book 5 stars as well, so it definitely sounds like it will be a very interesting read. Next, we have Dwellers by Eliza Victoria. This is a book that Katie Loves to Read talked about in a video about fantasy books by women of color, and this is obviously one of those books that she talked about. The synopsis doesn't give too much away on this one, but I believe it is about 2 guys who can inhabit other people's bodies, and basically they end up inhabiting the bodies of these 2 brothers. That's all I know about it. As I said, the synopsis doesn't give too much away, but I do like to try and support like women of color, and especially in the fantasy genre. I don't read a lot of fantasy, but I know that people of color in general, and especially women of color, are not very well represented within the fantasy genre. So it's definitely, this is the one that intrigued me most out of that video that she posted, so I definitely do want to check it out at some point in the future. And the final book that I marked as to read in the month of May is This Song Will Save Your Life by Layla Sales. This is yet another book that I've wanted to read for a really long time and just realized that I'd never marked it as to read on Goodreads. I don't know exactly the plot, but I believe it is about a girl who is really struggling like with how to find herself. It's a YA story, and I believe she gets involved in like DJing and like underground club like DJing or something. I'm not really sure, but people have had really positive things to say about this, and it's something that's always, every time I hear about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to read that. And then when I came across it on Goodreads again and realized that I'd never marked it as to read, I decided to rectify that situation basically, and this is a book that I definitely want to get to at some point. So those are all of the books that I marked as to read during the month of May. We are not too far away from having one of these videos for June because I'm filming this really, really late. I will, as always, have links to all of the booktubers that I mentioned in this video down below where I got these recommendations, as well as all of the books that I mentioned down below. But if you're interested in marking them as to read on Goodreads, if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts, I would love to chat in the comments down below. Or if you have any more recommendations for me of books that you think that I would like to mark as to read, because that's one of my favorite things to do. I would love to hear them. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. But that's all I've got for this video today. Bye guys.